Welcome to the Holmlands Adventure Podcast. Storytelling inspired by adventure.
Welcome to the Holmlands Adventure Podcast. I'm your host, Cameron Hall, and it's a real pleasure to be joined today by one of the most humble and inspirational human beings that I have the privilege to know, Winter Paralympian Chris Lloyd. Hi, Chris. How are you doing?
Hiya, Cameron. Yeah, not too bad. You good?
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Thanks very much for coming on the show and having time to chat today.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure to catch up with you again.
You have probably one of the most inspirational stories that I know, and we obviously had the pleasure to work with you for the Paralympic Games in South Korea a couple of years ago. And your story is out there, and we were absolutely privileged to tell it. But we wanted to take the time now to go into it in a little bit more detail and perhaps share your story with a few people that might not have heard it. But before we get into your journey, I just wonder if you could take us back to sort of pre-September 2011, sort of the year 2011, just what life was like and, you know, what you're doing kind of work-wise and just give us a snapshot of, you know, life at that time.
Before sort of September 2011, I was just, working as normal, living the family life, just playing with the kids and bringing two young kids up and living with my partner. Yeah, so things were pretty normal and just doing normal things really and day to day, normal stuff. So
you're running your own business and that's going along well, but also you had a taste for rally car racing. How did that come about?
There was a friend of mine who was working with me at the time, and he was sort of big into the rallying, and he just sort of mentioned about sort of having a go, and we ended up sort of buying a car and just having a mess about and stuff, and then just got the bug and started doing it then for a couple of years.
And can you take us through sort of the races that you would do? What does a race look like? What's the nature of an event when you turn up to compete?
With the rallies we were doing, they were sort of closed roads, so we go over to Ireland and do an event which is organised. Then you would sort of recce, so you drive the event first, make your notes, and then the next day then you'd end up competing. So we travelled to Ireland, we travelled to the Isle of Man, we travelled to Jersey. So yeah, wherever the sort of rallies were really.
And are you racing or navigating? Do you take turns in that role?
I was the driver. I don't think I'd be a very good navigator, to be honest. But I was the driver, and then I'd have a navigator who'd sort of sit with me, sort of call the notes with the corners come in, and we'd work as a team then together.
So how do you prepare for a race? If the event in itself is closed roads, but presumably when you're working together to prepare for an event, the roads aren't closed. So how do you prepare, and where do you go, and what do you do prior to entering an event?
We'd go basically, we'd sort of book the event. The events are on a calendar, sort of yearly calendar. So we'd book the event, and then obviously we'd go there probably 3 or 4 days before, and then obviously get settled in, and then start to we'd have the notes and we'd have the route, and then we sort of recce the route, and then obviously make the notes in preparation for the race then.
So again, pre-September 2011, which we'll come on to, how many races have you got under your belt? How much experience do you have? Are you winning races? Are you getting podiums? And what stage are you at in your rally car career at that point in time?
Yeah, we were part of like the British Tarmac Championship. So we were sort of leading our class at the time, and I think we were probably 5th or 6th overall at the time with the overall championship. So we were doing okay. It was only our first sort of season we'd done it, and obviously we just amateurs, just doing an amateur sport. But like I said, it was the first season, so we didn't expect nothing, but we were doing quite well. And like I said, we were winning our class quite a lot, and we were regularly in the sort of top 10 as well. So yeah, we were doing okay, to be honest.
And what's the car that you're racing, and how does that differ for people that perhaps aren't familiar with rally car racing? How does it differ to a regular road car?
The main difference with the car that we were using would be the safety cage that is installed, and then everything is sort of stripped out of it, the interior and the back seats and everything, to make it as light as possible, so it can go as fast as it can, really. So like, they're the main differences, and obviously the suspension is upgraded, the engine is upgraded, the brakes, so it's all sort of tuned to be as fast as it can and brake as quick as it can, really.
And when you're doing well and you're getting on the podium and you're in the top 10, what are the sort of maximum speeds that you're hitting?
With the car we were in, it'd probably be like 120 mile an hour sort of maximum speed. But then when you're going through narrow lanes past trees and everything else, obviously it feels a lot faster. And we were in a 1974 Mark II Escort again, which is quite small, and so it does feel quite fast then as well.
Going back to the September 2011, you enter an event, I guess, preparing for it as you would do any other day, but it wasn't like a normal event by the end of the day. Could you take us back to your earliest memories of the race itself and why it was, and take us through why it was turned out to be very different to any other race that you competed in the past?
Like I said, yeah, it was the same sort of, we had the same navigator and everything, so we were sort of we went through the first stage. Okay, I think we were fourth or third, I can't remember, something like that. After the sort of first stage, we went back out on the second stage, and then we had sort of a massive accident. And the only thing I remember is the car going off the road, having a bump to my head, and sort of ended up upside down in a car, and I was paralysed from the neck down, and that was it, really.
And what was your first memory after the crash?
My first memory after the crash was just waking up upside down in fear, really, that I tried to move sort of my arms and legs and nothing would move. And so, and obviously we were trapped in the car because it was upside down in a ditch as well. So there was sort of no way of getting out, and obviously I couldn't move because I was paralysed. So yeah, they were the sort of memories I had.
Did you lose consciousness at any point in time, or were you aware of the crash as it was happening?
I was aware of the crash at the start, and then there was a big impact which knocked me out, and then the next thing I knew, I sort of woke up upside down, and and that was that then. And
are you aware of how long you were knocked out for?
I'm not sure, to be honest. I think it would only be a matter of minutes more than anything else.
So is yourself and your navigator in the car, how are you communicating with him? Is he trying to wake you up? Is he out as well? What was that moment like when you did regain consciousness and being aware of, there's somebody else in the car with you as well?
Yeah, I was just, because of the fear and everything, and obviously you're stuck in the car, you don't know whether it's going to catch fire or anything else. I was just sort of asking him to get me out, because he was moving and doing his belts and able to sort of get out. But obviously, like, looking at me from his point of view, he couldn't sort of move me because he sort of must have known I had a serious injury because I couldn't move nothing. So yeah, that was probably as much as I could do. And then within sort of a matter of minutes, then the sort of rescue team arrived then.
And do you remember what you were saying to each other at that point in time? You mentioned that the paralysis, was that something that you felt, instantly, that you knew that you were paralyzed, or was that something that you obviously learned afterwards?
I knew straight away because we were upside down. My hands were sort of dangling in front of me, and it was just a surreal feeling that I could see them but couldn't feel them and couldn't move them. So yeah, it's just fear kicks in then, that obviously you can't do nothing, you can't get out. And like you said, the car could have gone up in flames and there was nothing I could have done. So it was just like the fear factor, really.
So how did you get out of the vehicle? How long were you in the car for before you were removed from it?
It seemed like a lifetime that I was in the car because they had to come, the medics come, and obviously the rescue came. They started cutting me out, and like I said, it felt like a lifetime. I think possibly it could have been sort of 45 minutes to an hour they took to obviously get me out because they couldn't move me or risk sort of moving me because it looked like it damaged my spinal cord at the time, and so obviously it could have killed me if they moved me as well. So it did take a lot of time, and I think it would have been sort of close to an hour, really.
And presumably you're taken straight to hospital at that point for some treatment?
Yeah, then straight to the critical care in Newport then.
Which is how far away from where the event was taking place?
It probably would have been sort of 15 or 20 minutes drive to the hospital.
For your friend and colleague who's navigating, was he okay? Was he taken to hospital as well? Did he have any of the same injuries that you did?
He was taken to hospital for a check, but he was fine. He was sitting lower in the car, and the impact of the tree was on my side, so he sort of came out okay. A bit obviously shaken up with obviously the accident, but injury-wise, I think he was just a bit bruised and battered, really.
So what's running through your head at this point in time, while you're in the car and then in the ambulance? Could you take us through what thoughts are running through your mind?
I think it's just a lot of fear because there's a lot of unknowns. You don't really know what injuries you've got. Obviously, you can't do nothing for yourself, and I think it's just the unknown and not knowing what the future holds and how serious your injuries are as well. So I think they were the sort of biggest things going through my mind at the time.
And so when you're in the hospital, how long does it take to get the diagnosis of what your injuries were?
To be honest, I can't really remember. I know I had sort of the MRIs and everything, and I think it possibly would have been sort of the day after, or maybe 2 days after, that the sort of consultant came in and said, sort of compare me to Christopher Reeves and said my life's going to be sort of very different going forward. So yeah, that was a sort of big shock then from that sort of moment.
And how did that make you feel? Because Christopher Reeve's accident was obviously Christopher Reeve plays Superman, and his accident was very well publicized. How aware were you of his story, and what did you think when you heard the medical consultant say that to you?
I wasn't too aware of, obviously, I know he'd had an accident and he was in a wheelchair and everything else, but I wasn't really, fully aware of the extent of what he had. But the biggest thing was he did say at the time as well that I'd never ski again and never drive a rally car, and them two things sort of was stuck in my mind ever since, coming in that room and telling me things that I loved that I couldn't do again was quite a big impact.
Going back to life before the crash, active guy, sporty, into the outdoors, what sort of things would you be doing outside of rally car driving?
Yeah, just general stuff, mountain biking with the kids, going up the mountain, playing football, playing basketball, and just generally, sporty and active, and just generally doing stuff with the family, to be honest.
And how old were your two kids at the time?
Morgan would have been 8, and then Ella would have been, I think she was 5 at the time.
And do you remember what it was like delivering the news to them and how they reacted to the accident?
Yeah, I think Ella was quite young and didn't really sort of understand fully what was going on. So that wasn't too difficult, but obviously Morgan was that much older, which sort of hit him quite hard, seeing me in hospital and obviously everything taken away. So, that was a quite devastating for me as well, seeing, feeling like I'd let my children down, let my family down as well, because there was a sense that, I I've gone and done something and let them down, and I can't, and I know that he was sort of crying, saying, am I ever going to play sort of football or sport with him? So yeah, that was, really probably the toughest moments, to be honest.
And when the medical consultant gave you the diagnosis, what did he say to you in terms of the recovery side of things to help get you out of the hospital and help to get you back home? What was he saying to you in terms of what you had to do to try and rehabilitate?
They were basically looking to put me into a sort of special spinal unit to get some sort of rehab and stuff. So that was the main focus. And then basically there was a time frame of, they were saying sort of 3 years will be the main bit of your recovery, and then sort of nothing much will happen after that. So that was sort of the parameters I was given.
When you were you ever told that you would never walk again? Was that was that information ever relayed, or was there, were you told that with the right steps that you would be able to recover some mobility?
Not really. I was only really told that life would be very different, and like the things like skiing and obviously the rallying and stuff I wouldn't be able to do again. So yeah, there was never sort of, he didn't ever say, you're never going to walk again, but basically he said it's going to be very different. And like I said, a lot of the things that I've normally done that I'm going to be not be able to do, really.
Because presumably, I think a lot of people with that word paralysis, that's the automatic thing that they would assume. So even though you weren't told that, was that something that you were thinking in your mind that you might have to, as you say, with Christopher Reeve, who did spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair, was that something that you were thinking that might be a reality for yourself?
No, well, once he said I couldn't do something, it was like a determination in my head that, I was going to prove him wrong, and I was going to get back and doing the things I love, and that's the only thing which I can which set sort of precedence in my head. And it was just whatever it took, I was going to do what it took to sort of get back and doing them things.
So how do you go about that? What sort of treatment are you getting, and what does that rehabilitation program look like?
Basically, I sort of got transferred after a couple of weeks to the rehabilitation centre in in Cardiff. But then sort of during the time, I had an X-ray when I was in the rehabilitation centre, and they found out that I sort of broke my back, which they didn't know about. So after that period, then when they found the sort of X-ray, I couldn't attempt any rehabilitation. I had to sort of lay in a bed then for another sort of 6 or 7 weeks to let all the sort of bones and everything heal, just to make sure my back was stable before I could even start to attempt any rehabilitation.
You obviously experienced a horrendous accident, and then being delivered with that news that that your back was broken as well. How did you feel when you received the results of the X-ray?
Yeah, it was just another blow, really, and it was something that I had to come to terms with and just sort of get on with. Really, it was nothing I could have done. So yeah, I had to sort of deal with it, really, and just move forward.
So when you're lying there, is it a case? Could you do anything for yourself at that point in time? Were you able to feed yourself and go to the bathroom and things like that, or did you need help with everything?
No, it was basically everything. I couldn't sort of use my hands and everything and stuff. So I was being fed, I was being moved, and so when I was in the bed, it was basically sort of had a catheter in, so you could go to the toilet, and everything else was facilitated for you. You had to be sort of moved by the nurses and everything, and just sort of, you were reliant on everybody else, to be honest.
So the accident happened in September 2011, and you've touched upon the fact that you were told you'd never be able to race a rally car or ski again, with skiing obviously being a huge passion as well. But almost 12 months to the day, I think it was in October 2012, you find yourself in the snow dome in Tamworth, I believe, skiing. So how do you go from being at that point with all the injuries that you had, with a broken back, to not being able to feed yourself, to then being in a position to actually be on skis? What steps did you go through to be able to get to that point?
It's all a bit of a blur, to be honest, but it was a lot of mental focus, and obviously the family were coming back and forth and obviously giving me massive support. My brother came, he was living up in Basingstoke at the time, so he came over and sort of gave me some sort of audio stuff, and there was some meditation, and so the only thing I could use really at that time was my brain. So I started meditating, and the physio that I was seeing at the time before the accident, she had told me that you can rebuild pathways if you've lost them and stuff. So I had sort of hope, because people were telling me that there are possibilities. So the only thing I could really do them times in bed was visualizing my sort of everything sort of working again and getting function. And like I said, I'd had movement in my toe and stuff. So I sort of progressed with that. I sort of moved my thumb. So it was just a progression. Once something started moving, I just progressed it. I probably didn't even sleep, to be honest. Every hour, every day, I was just focusing on something working, on something moving, on getting that toe moving a little bit more, getting that thumb moving a bit more. And then once that moved, and then the next finger and the next toe, and it was just building blocks over weeks, just trying to reestablish everything.
When you were meditating, is that something that you had done prior to the accident, or was it something that was introduced to you in this period of time when you're working, as hard as you can to recover? It's
something that I'd sort of heard about and my brother had spoke about, but yeah, something that I never really sort of utilised. But then at that time, that was the only thing I could utilise, and yeah, it provided a massive tool to help me use my brain to recover, really.
And how important was that for you to have something that provided a mental stimulus while you were physically incapacitated?
I think that was huge, really. I needed something that I could rely on and I can sort of progress with, and being able to do these sort of meditations and things. The other things I learned was pain control. So eventually, when I was in hospital lying in bed, I was having so much medication, I didn't really know where I was or what was happening. So I came off all my medication and I had to deal with the pain then. So I used sort of meditation to help deal with the pain. And it was, it was sort of when your back's against the wall, it's surprising, how powerful the mind is.
And was that something that was that a personal choice? Was that something that you said to the medical professionals that were helping you, that you wanted to come off the medication and take this route, or was it something that they perhaps suggested to you?
No, it was all my decision, really. I just wanted to know where I'm at, and like I said, I was getting so many different side effects from medications and hallucinating and stuff with the drugs. I just couldn't focus, and I needed to focus on for my recovery, really.
And was there perhaps something that a particular moment or comment or something that you heard within the audio books that you received from your brother that made you think, this is the way that I want to go? Because a lot of people, if they're in pain, will understandably want to take the drugs that they're given to nullify that. So to come off the medication and to focus on the mental side isn't necessarily the route that a lot of people would have chosen to have done. So what was it that specifically made you want to take that approach?
I think the reason I took that approach is that I just wanted to sort of get back in control of what I could control. So I was reliant on the drugs and I was reliant on the nursing staff. So like if I could get that element back and sort of control what was happening with, the sort of pain and everything else, and then sort of try and focus on the function, sort of that was the decision I thought would have been, the best thing to do, really.
From that moment that you're taken into the hospital to being able to regain a little bit of element control, how long of a journey and a period was that? And was there a particular breakthrough moment that you remember?
There was, I think, when I was in the original hospital before I got transferred, I sort of, I think it was my thumb or my toe started moving. So at that stage then sort of gave me hope then to sort of move forward. And I think that was sort of the key thing. But then obviously in between then I had the x-ray and the backward step with finding my back was broken. And then it was just, I wasn't able to do anything then. I was just sort of laid on bed rest really for like 7 weeks to let the back heal.
And so how do you get to that point of being on skis? And is that something that, are you effectively rehabilitated at that point in time? Have you got your full functionality back, or is it still a case that you've got a real sort of hangover from the accident still, and maybe you're pushing the boundaries a bit more than you should be at that point in time?
Yeah, it's a long road with neurology, to be honest. When I came out of hospital sort of 3.5 months after the accident, so I sort of came out, I was discharged in January 2012. So basically I could sort of walk with it, sort of holding a wheelchair and sort of do a few steps and sort of get by. But there was a mountain to climb. When I came home and I didn't have the assistance of the nurses, I didn't have all the hospital facilities around me, which sort of were nurturing me. That was a bigger shock when I came home and remembering climbing the stairs, getting in and out of the bath, getting up off the floor, like things I couldn't do, which I needed help with, was, I think, the biggest sort of reality check, knowing how far I'd gone backwards. But, in the same sense, I'd sort of come forward a lot from where I was as well. So,
did you have to make changes to the home as well? Were you having to, sleep downstairs rather than upstairs, or fit railings into the house, or did you have to make adaptations in that sense too?
We were lucky, so we already had railings and stuff in the house. So, and sort of I used the stairs for rehabilitation really. So there was no point in me sort of trying to avoid things. So I was sort of hitting things head on, and we had to put adaptations in the bathroom because obviously I couldn't get in and out of the bath and different things. So we had to adapt things in there for me. But like I said, I tried to keep things as normal as I could, because in my head I was going to get back as good as I could really.
Can you describe that first session when you are back on skis and what that was like?
When I first got back on skis, it was really bizarre because it was like I'd never skied before. I still was really sort of not very sort of strong in my legs, and it was just sort of bizarre. I had to have a lesson and sort of start again really, and it was sort of, again, it was just sort of tough when you knew you had the ability before and everything had been taken away, and it was like I had to start from scratch and start again. And I probably done sections of the runs and had to stop, and then it was so fatiguing, and it was take so much out of it with having a neurological injury. But I was elated as well at the same time, because I sort of told me that I wouldn't ski and I was back on him, so it was a massive mix of emotions really on that day.
And having done lots of different sports prior to the accident, what was it in particular about skiing that brought you to that specifically as a driver to help with your rehabilitation?
It's just such a difficult sport really. It's a lot of coordination. You're up in altitude, and it's just and just being in the environment of the mountains. I just love being in the mountains, and I just wanted to get back here, because even the well-being feeling of being amongst the mountains, just I feel is healing in itself, to be honest.
And from that first lesson, how do you then get to the point of starting to compete? And was competing in skiing anything that you'd done prior to the accident? Were you recreational skier? Were you had you been on coaching courses or anything of those types, or was the racing side something that was new to you?
the racing side I'd never done, and basically I'd seen posters and stuff when I was in the ski dome with DS UK and different things. So it wasn't something that I had on my radar, and basically sort of fell into it with different things and ended up sort of speaking to DS UK and getting involved with different things with them, and sort of ended up a bit of a route where I could see a sort of an opening where potentially I could sort of try and ski race.
And why racing? Because there's that element of understanding and appreciating that, but getting to enjoy a sport that you enjoyed before and getting back to experiencing that feeling, and yet being in the mountains and the wellness but you could still do that without having that competitive side. You could still work to progress to go on holiday with the family and ski with friends again. But what was it that made you gravitate towards thinking, right, I want to compete and I want to race?
I think I just set myself sort of goals, and once I got back on skis, there was sort of a realization that I sort of proved a point. I can get back, I can ski. But then my character is sometimes I go over and above what I sort of set myself. So I just thought, I'm going to race, and then I had to sort of set myself a goal that I want to get to a Paralympics, and then that was it. Then sort of I'd set my sights on that, and that was, nothing was going to stop me from sort of achieving that goal, really.
And were there other sports that you were looking at as well, or other things that you were doing at the time to try and push yourself, and or was it just skiing was just the pure focus throughout?
No, I sort of fell back into skiing, but I was looking at sort of other disability sports at the time. So I was going down to there was like a velodrome down in Newport. So it was there was the summer then with sort of the Paralympics in London 2012. So there was big stuff and big promotion going on. So I thought, cycling, would be a good rehabilitation, and maybe I can try and get into some sort of para sport of that. But I sort of had doors closed in my face, and basically with the cycling, I was told I was too old, and then I sort of went to rowing because it was a local club near me, and then I was told I was too short. So I was just like banging my head against the brick wall and thought, but then sort of the skiing sort of came, and sort of, I think maybe them doors were closed in my face for a reason, and I ended up having my goal as something I love doing, really.
And how old were you at the time of the crash?
Testing my memory now, I was 37 when I had the crash.
There's not only the fact of you're recovering from a really serious accident, but also a lot of athletes probably wrap up whatever competition that they're competing in and sport that they're competing in around that age. 37 is probably the end of most people's professional sporting career if they haven't finished already. So I imagine that in itself is also pretty challenging and tough.
Yeah, it is challenging, obviously, my age. But like I said, there's no point putting sort of boundaries in front of yourself. I didn't see age as being a problem. And like I said, if you've got the determination, and the drive to sort of try and achieve something, you just got to sort of go for it, really. And unless you try, you don't really know.
So with the rejection that you got from cycling and rowing, did that energy then get focused into skiing?
Yeah, sort of every time I get knocked back, I sort of dig my heels in a little bit more and try a little bit harder. So yeah, sometimes like it's not a bad thing having a knockback, because it takes your focus a little bit sort of further, and sort of you determine then to prove people wrong, really, to be honest. So yeah, I don't think it was a bad thing for me.
So what is your physical condition at this point in time? So 12 months after the crash, you're on skis for the first time. What's the diagnosis at this stage? How has your body recovered, and what sort of injuries do you still have, and what are you dealing with in effect?
Yeah, with the injury I received, I damaged my spinal cord at C3, C4, so which affects quite a lot of things, to be honest. So, like my muscle function isn't the same, my balance isn't the same. I've lost quite a lot of feeling, so like not seeing my feet and stuff when I'm walking has sort of an effect on my balance with the proprioception. So, like there was a load of things that would affect it. I couldn't feel hot and cold, and so my temperature regulation would throw me out and sort of cause other things to go a bit haywire. So, like I said, there was numerous things going on, which I was still a long way from where I was before the accident, really.
So the coordination issues, the temperature issues when it comes to sport like skiing, that's you're dealing with variables in weather and temperature all the time. You're dealing with coordination as one of the the core skills of the sport, and then trying to put all this together into competition. What was it like when you entered your first race, and how did you fare?
The first race was a bit of a reality check, to be honest. I was in a snow dome in Landgraf, and I don't know, I must have been sort of 10 or 12 or 15 seconds behind the leader. So I was sort of in a 30-second course or whatever. I was sort of miles behind, but yeah, it was aside that didn't really faze me. It was just the fact that I'd got to that point and I was actually trying to ski through a course and I'd never done. So I'd sort of completed another sort of challenge I'd set myself down. So yeah, it was just more of a buzz, to be honest.
For a lot of people that perhaps listening, and I think a lot of people when they hear your story and they hear what your condition is like and they think of people with disabilities skiing, you think of the sit ski, but that's not what you do at all. Could you perhaps describe how you ski and how your physical sort of condition is on the slope?
The way I just ski the same as a normal person, so I'll ski with 2 skis, 2 poles. The thing that I struggle with, obviously, I haven't got a feeling, so it's hard to feel your feet. And with the cold, obviously, you lose a bit of sensation. So a lot of the time, I've got no feeling in my feet. So, like, I rely on my eyes quite a lot. So that's quite a tough bit. And obviously, the temperature and stuff, you don't really know what's sort of happening. So if I get too hot, it sort of affects my cognitive function, hitting the bumps and hitting things which disorientates me, changes my cognitive function. So there's just numerous challenges which, like I said, I've never sort of experienced and don't really know how to explain to people. But even like the breathing element of, because my diaphragm is affected as well because the injury was so high. So I haven't, if I'm not getting the oxygen in again, that affects my cognitive function. So it's just a massive amount of variables which, have play a part to trying to achieve to get on a course.
And at what point did the Paralympics become a viable option for you?
It probably would have been a year into my racing, potentially, I think, or a year and a half. I was sort of getting a little bit better and getting sort of quicker. And then, I was, in some of the races, I was sort of 5 seconds off, the best guys in the world. So I'd sort of gained, and sort of climbed closer to these guys. And so then it sort of, potentially sort of started to think, maybe that, I can do this.
And so the accident was in 2011. Presumably, we're looking at the next Winter Paralympic Games, which are in Sochi in 2014. Was it a realistic ambition to compete at those games?
I don't think it was realistic for me to compete in Sochi, but I was still pushing and still, trying my best. And I did reach the qualification criteria in the December, I think it was, before the games. But the long list had already been selected and everything, or the process had already been done. So, like, I did sort of meet the selection criteria, but it was obviously too late. But I think I wasn't really ready at that time. I would have sort of competed for the sake of competing, to be honest.
But you had the opportunity to go out to Russia with the development squad. What was that experience like in being given a taste of what the Paralympics were all about?
Yeah, no, that was an amazing experience to go on the inspiration program and go out and see the games and be part of it and everything, and go to the opening ceremony. So yeah, it was a massive part of the journey, and it was surreal. You know, I was as a potential athlete for the next game. So yeah, it was an amazing feeling.
And that Games for Paralympics GB was, at that point in time, the most successful Winter Paralympics that the country had ever had. How much of motivation and inspiration did you gain from that, and knowing that the sport was in the UK was being pushed to new levels?
Yeah, no, it was amazing to be part of it, and obviously Kelly Gallagher got the gold out there as well, which was, it was amazing for Britain to get a gold in, winter sports. So like you said, it was all quite inspirational for me, and being part and seeing the team potentially getting stronger going to the next games was sort of an amazing feeling, really.
Having been through the inspiration program and with the focus on PyeongChang in 4 years' time, you've got that 4-year window. What are you doing to try and get yourself into that position? Could you give a sense of what it takes to each season to race, and what are the races that you're doing? What does that look like? Where are you going? Who are you competing against? Just a little bit of a flavour of what that Paralympic cycle is like to experience.
Yeah, basically this cycle then, obviously the season begins in sort of November. There are sort of summer races which we don't normally attend, but the sort of season starts in November, then we'll sort of go through to April. Obviously there'll be a lot of sort of pre-season training and going to sort of glaciers in Norway and stuff in the summer as well, training. And then obviously the competitions start in November, so there'd be a mix of we'd be going to Europa Cups and World Cups depending on our sort of points then, because to race in World Cups you need sort of lower points, and then the next, the lower stage is Europa Cup. So we'd be going to sort of them type of races, and then basically racing against the best guys in the world. And obviously that was sort of where we're at really with it.
And presumably because of the nature of your condition and your injuries that you're carrying, do you need a very tailored, bespoke coaching program to help you? Are you being coached with a group, with other skiers in the same discipline, or are you kind of off on your own doing your own thing?
With the on snow training, we were part of obviously a team, so we'd have sort of a coach. So basically, it did change scenarios, through the program, but there was probably like a male sort of coach who was coaching the male sort of stand-ins and sit-in, which sort of I worked with, and then the girls had a sort of coach with them then doing their bits. So yeah, that's how we sort of worked with us at that time.
And how confident did you feel throughout the cycle that you would make the selection for PyeongChang?
Yeah, well, I was no doubt in my head. I sort of was determined to make it, and I had sort of no qualms, and I was going to put everything in, and I was going to sort of make that selection really.
Are you still meditating throughout this period? Are you still using those positive visualization techniques? Has that now become part of your routine?
Yeah, the mental thing is, once I'd started it in hospital, I sort of never let go of it, because I was still dealing with a lot of pain, still dealing with a lot of issues. So it was sort of in my toolbox really to help me get through sort of hard times, and help me progress in good times as well.
And so as things move forward, how are your results developing as you're competing in more and more races?
Yeah, the results were sort of getting better, and I was getting stronger, and I was sort of starting to get into the sort of top 20 in the world and stuff with the rankings. But then I had it would have been the end of 2016. I was racing and doing quite well in the speed races, and sort of had good points, but I ended up tearing a ligament in my knee, which sort of put me out then for sort of a couple of months. And so I was sort of hitting my peak then, where I was I was getting in World Cup races, I was getting in the top 10, and sort of within sort of half a second off the podium, 0.4 of a second off the podium. So really sort of starting to push it, and then obviously had the injury then.
And how much of a setback was that? How long did that knock you sort of back for?
That was a massive sort of setback, really, because with my neurological injury, it was basically like my body had sort of been thrown a curveball, and whereas the pathways that I'd sort of helped me sort of find again were sort of all thrown back up, and it was it took sort of months to get sort of being able to ski again. But then when I jumped back on skis, it felt like I was back to square one when I was learning to ski again, because my balance, my coordination, everything had sort of gone back to scratch, and it was like I'd sort of lost a lot of stuff that I've already learned.
So it sounds like you're almost having to constantly reprogram yourself, and you're having to go back to basics a lot.
Yeah, it's with the neurology that I've got. If I get an injury or something changes, it's like I've got to reset every time and relearn again. So it's just bizarre, but it's just part of my injury. And it's like I said, when something happens, it just takes me months then to relearn, something that I've already learned. So it's not autonomous in my body anymore.
As things are edging closer and closer towards the Winter Paralympics in South Korea, how did that rehabilitation go? Were you getting back to your best?
Well, once I was able to ski again, it was coming towards a test event in 2017, where I just managed to be able to ski to go to the test event. But I went to the test event, and obviously I wasn't very strong, and I was still sort of relearning patterns again. So that didn't go too good, and my confidence was down a lot. So really the start of the 2018 season was quite tough then, because I was sort of, I'd gone back a lot of steps and was trying my best to get get back to my best. But like I said, it was quite sort of tough, and I had sort of family issues as well along them times, which were sort of life-changing as well. So it was sort of a tough time, really.
In terms of the confidence side of things, you're obviously putting a lot of energy and effort and determination, focus into this goal of making it to the games. How do you keep yourself motivated? Where do you, when you are feeling low, where do you get your pickups from? How do you keep your spirits high and continue to focus without just feeling exhausted by it all, receiving these injury knockbacks and having to swim against the tide a lot of the time? How do you keep your spirits high?
I think a lot of the motivation came from my family, and like I said, I felt like I'd let them down when I had the accident and couldn't do stuff for them. So I just wanted to make them feel proud again, and through that sort of making your family feel proud of it is a massive motivation, to be honest.
And you mentioned some difficult times. So in the preparation and readiness for the Paralympics, you had a bit of devastating news from within the family as you're just getting sort of back on track with the death of your brother. How did that impact your preparations for the Paralympics?
Yeah, so that was at the start of the 2018 season that sort of my brother had sort of taken his life, and that was a massive turning point in my life, losing not just a brother but a best friend as well. So at that time I just wanted to quit, really, and just give up, because like you said, there's more important things in life sometimes, and But yeah, I was sort of, my head was all over the place and I couldn't really focus. And like you said, it was sort of devastating. And he had 2 young children as well, which, sort of was heartbreaking as well. So like you said, it was really tough times.
How do you come back from such a devastating loss? How do you get back on track and refocus again?
I think it was just taking time and sort of speaking to people and speaking to family. And like I said, my head was all over the place. And, like you said, he was the best friend as well as a brother. But like you said, people were telling me, look, he wouldn't want him to give up. He wanted to come and see you. He wanted, he was going through tough times with things in his life. But like you said, they were telling me that, look, he wouldn't want him to just quit. He'd want to see you there. Just so, yeah, I think that was why I continued, really, because he would have wanted me to go and do what I'd set out, really.
And when the call came to let you know that indeed you had been selected for the team, how did you feel at that time?
I was elated, really, when I had the call and got told I was on the team. So, like I said, it was a dream at one point. Then it was a goal that I set myself, and then you're achieving your dreams is something that like I said, it was surreal, really, to be honest.
And what was that moment like when you're at the Paralympics? You're in South Korea. You're representing Great Britain, and obviously very proud Welshman as well. And the family are watching. You're in the gates. Does it hit you how far you've come from having such a serious crash with such horrific injuries and everything that you've been through? Are you self-aware at that point in time, or is it just being completely focused in the zone about the race that you've got ahead of you, and that it's not job done just yet?
Yeah, I think when I first got out there, it was a realization, and obviously it was tears in when I was on my own sometimes, just thinking, I can't believe that I did actually do, I set myself that goal and did get there, really. So I did have points, and then I had to sort of refocus and think, well, I'm here now. I've just got to sort of do the best I can, really, and I've made it. I've achieved my goal and my dream, really. So let's go and sort of do my best.
You competed in the speed events, finishing 20th in the downhill and 25th in the Super G, which is remarkable because I had the pleasure to be out there and cheering you on. The field of competition was huge. There's so many competitors in your category, and in the nicest way, many of them are half your age, and the conditions were difficult as well. With the temperature is actually quite warm out in South Korea at that time, and you're not the first race of the day. There's a number of races before you. So how did all of that come into play? In being aware that you mentioned that your temperature receptors aren't perhaps as tuned as an able-bodied person. How do you deal with all of the these variables with the heat and the perhaps not ideal skiing terrain on a race day?
I think you just with skiing it's changeable anyway. It's with the light, with everything sort of changeable. You just learn to adapt to every sort of situation. So like you said, I put strategies in place, so I had to just use them and adapt. But like I'm sort of still learning now, to be honest. But I just sort of had a plan and sort of put it in place. But I think the most difficult thing is when we were sort of leaving the hotel. I think it would have been probably 6:30 in the morning, and then by the time we ended up racing, I think it was maybe midday. So it was a long time, and I've got to do a lot of rehabilitation before when I get up. I just don't move like a normal person. I'm quite seized up and stiff, so I've got to get everything functioning, which in the mornings could take an hour and a half, depending how bad I am. So when we were leaving at 6:30, I was getting up at like 4:45 to make sure I had my routine in and not racing till sort of 12 then. So, yeah, like I said, they were quite difficult conditions.
And did you feel that at the time? Were you on the race day? Did you feel ready for it? That this was everything that you've been working up towards? Did you feel present and in the moment, or was it a surreal experience? And it's finally here. Were you able to enjoy it ultimately?
Yeah, no, like I said, I enjoyed it. It was amazing, but like I said, the knee injury had sort of knocked me back, so I wasn't quite 100%. And then there was a couple other factors which sort of played a part. And then the sort of race I had in my head that I'd been visualizing for a year previous to when we done the test event in 2017 sort of didn't really happen because my cognitive function I hit a bump and it threw my cognitive and I couldn't sort of see the gates. So I was skiing down in and I'd lost my cognitive. So I couldn't really see where the gates were and couldn't sort of comprehend where I was. So yeah, it didn't really go to plan. But like I said, it was amazing to get it and actually do it anyway.
Well, I think the fact that you were there in itself is just remarkable. Everything that you've gone through to get to the point of being in a position to compete for the country is just phenomenal. And I know that you were disappointed or frustrated with the outcome and with the results, but how do you reflect back on that now, more than 2 years later? Are you able to enjoy it more than maybe you did at the time?
Yeah, I think obviously you got everybody will have when they compete and got a goal set in their head, and obviously when you don't achieve what you sort of think what you can sort of do is disappointing at the time, but then sort of looking back and reflecting, I mean, it's been an amazing part of my life, the journey and competing for your country, and so yeah, I'm proud of what I done, and yeah, just proud to sort of get it and achieve what I set myself out, sort of in 2012, really.
So I think I'm right in saying that there was another factor at play on the races in South Korea themselves. Could you perhaps tell us a little bit more about the injury that you're carrying at the time?
Yeah, when I came back, obviously I had a physio in the UK who I was seeing quite regular, and sort of I had some sort of more neurological symptoms, which was sort of enhanced to what they would normally be. So when I sort of seen her, and she was quite concerned when she examined me that sort of my sort of C3, C4, sort of my neck vertebrae were sort of quite a lot out of position where my original injury were really, which were causing sort of enhanced symptoms. So, but I did have a crash in training out in the games where I'd sort of done a somersault and sort of had an impact on my sort of head and neck. So obviously I'd sort of irritated my original injury really when I was sort of training out there as well, which I didn't realize how sort of bad it was, to be honest.
Which I think makes it even more impressive that you finished the races out there and that you were able to make it across the finishing line. So it's just phenomenal that you were able to do that, Chris. What are when you look back now, what are your standout memories from the games?
I think the standout memories are sort of the opening ceremony and stuff, and just seeing all that. We weren't, because we were competing the sort of next day, we weren't able to go, so we were all sort of sitting watching it on telly. So just being out there and being part of it all, and like I said, being in the village, and you had sort of North Korean sort of athletes coming in, which was, I think, where the people would think you'd see that in sort of our lifetimes really it was quite, that was quite a nice moment as well, which sort of sticks with me as well, to be honest, that sport can be more of an influence than, than just, in competing really.
And what was it like for you to have your partner Jessica and your two kids out there with you as well, cheering you on from the grandstand?
Yeah, that was probably one of the most emotional things, coming down, competing the race, and just going over to see them, and just sort of feeling the tears coming when I finished the race. The tears are sort of coming down, and then just looking over them and the emotion was huge, and I'd sort of completed the goal and the dream really, and having them there to to see me and be proud of me was the greatest moment really.
And perhaps some people might be surprised to hear this, but having suffered such a terrible crash, you're back into rally car racing. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, no, again, it was something I told I couldn't do, so I ended up sort of going back and doing a bit. So we've been doing a little bit of competing. So and I've been enjoying doing little bits of that, to be honest, as well.
So what's next for Chris Lloyd?
At the moment, I don't know. I'm just sort of chilling with the family and spending time with the kids and doing stuff with the family. And I don't really know, to be honest. Probably sort of set myself a goal, something to do probably in 2021. Obviously, it's difficult times at the moment with obviously the lockdown and obviously COVID-19 as well. So obviously just try and keep everybody safe, keep our relatives safe, and family safe is priority at the minute. And then, like you said, just get through these tough times, and hopefully get back to some sort of normality sooner rather than later.
Well, I think if there's anybody who's looking for any motivation to go out and achieve their aims and dreams and ambitions once we're out of this or within this current scenario, it's I think you're somebody that they can definitely look towards. Everything that you've accomplished and achieved and come through to be able to be in the position that you are today, I think is absolutely phenomenal, and it's an absolute pleasure to chat with you, Chris. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thanks, Cameron. Great to speak to you.